stick figure on YouTube, and he had an interesting proposition for you. He wanted to give you free gummies, but these gummies were special. Let's get straight to the point. If you've seen our drug series, which judging by the views you probably have, then you would have heard about our awesome sponsor 5CBD, and they even sponsored this video too. Don't skip, because if you're over 21 and live in the USA, you can get free gummies today. 5CBD's high potency gummies are perfect for catching a buzz without feeling bad about it. Whether you want a burst of energy with Surge, or a balanced vibe with Vibes, or if you want to unwind with Chill, these gummies have you covered for any situation. 5CBD also ensures top quality with third-party testing, meaning that these high-potency gummies are safe, reliable, and incredibly effective. One of my favorite parts about 5CBD is the convenience. Being able to have these shipped directly to my door without having to go to any sort of store is something I appreciate. And something else I appreciate about these gummies is the affordability. For the quality and effectiveness of these gummies, they are priced extremely reasonably. But luckily for you, if you are over 21 and live in any of the 50 states, then you can click my link in the description and claim your free samples of 5CBD gummies absolutely free, just pay shipping. These gummies are completely legal in all 50 states and are shipped directly to your door. So if you want to make watching a Trust Me Bro video even more fun, check out 5CBD using my link in the description. Now, let's get to the next call. But assuming you're a semi-reasonable person, you're likely not interested or swayed by the claims of an afterlife and UFOs and being a part of the Bible from random strangers. What a reasonable person may be interested in, though, is a community that worships God, people that are like-minded in faith, a faith that at surface level seems semi-reasonable. In this instance, you may be interested in the Children of God. This name already may sound familiar, and that's because Nick Crowley, a great YouTuber, just made a video about some of the lore involved with this cult. Specifically, the TV programs this cult was producing, which was insane. It was essentially propaganda pieces for children. And spoiler alert, it was pretty disturbing. But we'll get to that. The Children of God lore is deep, and I'll do my best to summarize it as neatly as possible. The Children of God was founded by a creep named David Berg in 1968. It initially attracted young followers with the message of love, communal living, and devotion, which may sound innocent enough, but the group soon became infamous for its controversial beliefs and practices. Most of these controversial beliefs and practices started to be introduced once the cult was more established. Initially, some of their beliefs were more conservative and aligned with the Bible, although it seemed that the group's beliefs started to morph to fit Berg's personal desires, which we'll get into. For example, initially the group was rather conservative and didn't even believe in hand-holding until marriage. But once Berg had an affair with his assistant, he then started spreading messages of polygamy, which turned into what he called sharing, which we'll get into. That gets a lot better. The holding with two individuals. This group was founded with a core focus on an apocalyptic prophecy, where Berg was claiming that the world was set to end in 1993. And the purpose of this group was to promote love and devotion to God so that they could be saved during this apocalypse. They spread their messages through song and dedicated as much time as possible to praising God before the end time. Child members of this group were not even educated because they saw it as a waste of time because the world was ending soon anyway. So all of the children and adults in this group were simply sitting, hanging out, singing songs, waiting for the end of the world, which to me doesn't sound like a great time. But that's just me. Floor Edwards, the previous member of the Children of God, said this about the cult's mindset at the time. Quote, "For many it was euphoric thinking about the afterlife. We earned that spot in heaven. We were the chosen ones." That's definitely a take on it. Interestingly, Berg wasn't seen very often by most of the cult members, as at its peak, the group had over 10,000 members worldwide. Although he was in consistent communication with all of his followers through what he called Mo letters, which was essentially daily propaganda pieces, where he would take Bible verses and intertwine them with his own twisted doctrines, which, like I mentioned earlier, evolved over time. These Mo letters included instructions that his followers must follow. Strangely enough, a lot of the imagery in these letters was rather graphic. We'll say that. According to ex-members of the Children of God, Mo wrote over 3,000 of these Mo letters, which is insane. But these letters weren't the only way that the Children of God was able to get their message. Like I mentioned, Nick Crowley made a great video about the TV series that the Children of God had created and that was televised called Life with Grandpa, in which he describes the TV show essentially indoctrinating children into the values of the group and the religious beliefs that were unsavory, to say the least. To really paint the picture, there's a scene in the show where the kid is shown as a robot with literal boobs, and Grandpa, aka David Berg, was talking about how much he loves this perfect woman. And there's many episodes of young girls thinking about how their purpose is to cook, clean, and take care of the men in their life. That is honestly just a tame sampling of some of the cool stuff in this cult's Of course, I'm using cool ironic. Now, going back to the concept of sharing. Without getting too graphic, essentially, Berg was promoting love with no bounds. He claimed that Jesus created
This isn't your typical pest control. Which of these are customized to your bug problem? That's right, none of them. The stuff you get at the store is a one-size-fits-all solution that just scratches the surface. Meaning,
love and sex for people to enjoy, and he thought the best way to honor God was to have it without limits, which to him meant with anybody at any time, consenting or not, which also included with children, which is obviously disgusting. Former members who were children at the time said that they felt pressured to do anything with anyone because they knew if they said no that they would be punished by God and potentially not accepted into heaven when the apocalypse, which was in their minds soon. This unsurprisingly led to widespread allegations of sexual exploitation and abuse, of course, including minors. The Children of God faced significant backlash and legal scrutiny due to reports of emotional, psychological, and sexual abuse among members, although that wasn't quite enough to take it down fully. That was the bump in the road for the group. After David Berg died, his assistant, who he was having the affairs with, took over the group and tried rebranding the group multiple times in an attempt to distance it from its dark past. And they even tried to renounce some of their harmful practices. However, the decades of trauma experienced by former members was an inseparable part of the cult's history. And with the death of David, the rebrands, and all of the allegations, the group went from over 10,000 members worldwide to today being a small underground internet community. And I personally hope it continues to shrink to the point of nothingness very soon. I'm sure the world not ending in 1993 also had a big part to do with it. Interestingly, multiple celebrities were actually involved with this cult, notably Joaquin Phoenix and Rose McGowan. Rose McGowan described her experience as extremely stressful, like she was walking a high-wire act. She was expected to be perfect physically, and remember when she had a blemish on her finger. How Rose was involved in this group is because her father was actually the leader of the Italian branch of the Children of God. But fortunately, once the Children of God started promoting child abuse, her dad separated from the group entirely. Joaquin Phoenix and his siblings in the 1970s were also involved in the group, and even traveled through Central and South America with the group, but didn't remain members for long, as initially they thought it was a dedicated religious group, but found out that it was much deeper than that at times. It's upsetting enough when individuals are tricked into joining cults and doing unspeakable things, having horrible fun, but it's just downright disheartening and depressing when they get their children involved too. Likely unsurprisingly, the Children of God had an extremely high suicide rate, with many ex-members having lifelong trauma, psychological illnesses, and at the very least, horrible, unsettling things. But if you're not interested in aliens, and you're not interested in any sort of religious movement, what if a man approached you and told you that he could tell you when you're going to die? This, to anybody, may seem like an interesting proposal, but the more info you start to get, the more the cracks start to show. This man referred to himself as Lou Castor and claimed that he was 1,000 years old and he was a combination of the 3 different angels. He claimed that he had died and came back to life and that now he himself could predict deaths accurately, among other things. Potentially one of the biggest draws for some is that Lou claimed that if you were close to him, he could not only predict your death, but bring you back to life, which for most people sounds like a good reason to stick around. But on top of the claims of being resurrected, from a surface level, it looked like the members of this group lived a relatively lavish lifestyle. Lou had a compound in Wichita, Kansas, where he had 10 members of the group living with him. Everybody who was completely provided for with food, shelter, technology, gadgets, luxury vehicles, anything these members could want, they had, and it was all provided for by Lou. But interestingly enough, nobody knew what Lou did for work. He said he had stocks and bonds and a cattle ranch down in Texas, but nobody could directly pinpoint his wealth, and it didn't seem like anybody was extremely concerned because they were directly benefiting from it, although it definitely came with a price. Having a 10-person company with luxury vehicles in Wichita, Kansas, it definitely drew attention. But for this cult, that wasn't the issue. And Lou was an active participant in the community. He would donate to the police, have community-wide barbecues in his backyard, and even had an ATV track on his 10-acre property where anybody could come and enjoy the track. This sense of community definitely allowed people to feel a little bit more comfortable, and I think people assumed that if he had something to hide, he wouldn't be so flashy, which may seem reasonable, but you can also say this is more or less of a John Wayne Gacy approach. Behind closed doors, terrible things were happening, and although on the surface it seemed like an outgoing, luxury lifestyle of cool having fun, it was really anything but that once you got to the core of the group. When Angels Landing went from Texas to Wichita, Kansas, they actually gained 3 new members: Lou's real estate agent and 2 young daughters. This real estate agent sold Lou the property, and upon meeting him, she felt very compelled to not only be close to him but protect him, and he shortly after confessed to her that he was an agent. Because of this information, this real estate agent uprooted herself and her 2 young daughters from Wichita, Kansas to join the commune, leaving her husband and her children's father behind. I'm assuming you can guess where this is going, and it ended up with Lou assaulting and abusing both of these young girls. But not only that, combining it with mental manipulation to make them feel like it was almost normal, which it obviously wasn't at all. In 2000, the story got a lot more publicized, as one of the members living in the commune had passed away. This member had seemingly fallen, hit their head, and then fell into the pool, which caused them to drown and die, which obviously got a lot of attention but wasn't necessarily considered suspicious. It is not legal. The death aligned with most accidental drowning deaths and was not considered for having any foul play, although that didn't mean that there wasn't any questions stirring about this commune within the community. At this time, unbeknownst to Lou and the rest of the commune, the police were actually closely monitoring the commune, but not for the reasons you may have thought. They were being monitored by the narcotics department because Lou had unexplained wealth, and their assumption was that there was an illegal drug operation or something along those lines funding unlimited money. And with the news breaking of this death on the property, some members in the community had their own questions. This member that they lost was considered to be the mother of the group, and she was Lou's right-hand woman. And it was a tragic loss within the group and outside of the group, as she was somebody that people looked up to, and at least had a positive relationship with, publicly. Following the death of the member who passed away in the pool, the other members of the group were waiting for Lou to bring her back, as he claimed that this was an ability of his. And after some time passed, Lou came to the court and claimed that he doesn't want to bring Patricia back. Lou claimed that where Patricia is now is much better than where we are, and that our goal is to meet her where she's at, and not to bring her back here. And I suppose that was a satisfactory response. And although the death was ruled as accidental, the FBI was interested, to say the least. They began looking into a Lou Castro and realized that there is no record of this person. No documents, no birth certificate, no driver's license. They were dealing with a ghost, until they found one piece of information referencing the name. This was an obituary for a woman he used to live with in a previous smaller commune. This woman had passed away with her new boyfriend and daughter during a leisure trip, and unfortunately, shortly after takeoff, this entire group passed away. It's an interesting side note, but Lou was previously a plane mechanic. That, again, was ruled as an accidental death. But the coincidences are starting to kind of fall apart here. 3 years after the death of the woman in the pool, her husband, another member of Angel's Landing, was killed as well. He was working on his car and laying underneath the vehicle when his jack failed, crushing and killing him. The unfortunate and tragic death of this second member of Angel's Landing was a pivotal moment in discovering the truth. Like I mentioned, the Angel's Landing group was already under investigation secretly by the FBI and local authorities. But once 2 accidental deaths took place within 3 years, they ramped up their search and began looking at alternative means of information. And one thing they found that cracked this case wide open was the insurance payouts on these group members. Both Patricia, the woman who died in the pool, and her husband, who died under the car years later, had large life insurance policies, both of which specifically paying out to the Angel's Landing group, which was 100% controlled by Lou Castro. Each of these policies paid out over $1.2 million. And suddenly, things are starting to make a lot of sense. Somebody who's able to predict deaths and then have them magically happen, somebody who has accidental deaths magically follow him around, and somebody who has an unexplainable amount of wealth, but no source of income. All now starts to make a lot more sense when you realize that there may be some foul play going on here. But in case that's not enough to make you convinced that there was something really strange going on in this cult, 2 years after the husband of the initial woman who died passed away, there was a third death within the group. It was the death of the real estate agent who moved into the commune to protect him. This same woman that had 2 young daughters in the group. Lou got her 2 young daughters together and told them that it was her mother's time and that she was going to die shortly. Obviously, they were extremely upset and didn't want to believe it, and they told their mom. And their mom didn't seem too fazed and reassured them that she wasn't going anywhere and that she was going to be fine. But unfortunately, 2 days later, she passed away in a horrible car accident. And at that point, detectives were no longer allowing this to go on anymore. Once again, a life insurance payout was due to hit Lou's account any day. And coincidentally, the previous balance was getting pretty low from the last payout. It's almost like this was how he was funding his lifestyle. At this point, detectives were just going to his property and had a unique plan to collect fingerprints to try to get more information. They knocked on Lou's door and they told him that they were looking for information on local criminals and had pictures of criminals that they wanted him to potentially identify. The detectives entered his home and were starting to show him pictures, hoping to get fingerprints on the photographs. But you notice that Lou was only grabbing these photos with his fingernails, meaning that he knew what was going on and that we were not going to get any fingerprints. Eventually, they were able to get him on charges of bank fraud, but realized that they needed to get him on these murders if they wanted him to serve any substantial time. And at this point, the stars almost aligned, because the eldest of the two young girls who were a part of this group at this point was an adult, and had met a man who shortly became her boyfriend. Not long into dating, they had a moment, and she opened up to him about everything. And that night when she went to bed, he went to the FBI website.
Eating a large family can get expensive, but that's where Birdseye Voila skillets come in. They're delicious and a great price.
Informed them about everything in strange cult in Wichita. Surprisingly, they were quick to respond, collected her statement, and began a full-blown investigation on all of these claims. They were able to speak to the younger daughter as well, where they were able to collect all the information they needed to put this man away for a serious. During this Lou person's trial, it was revealed that his name isn't Lou at all, and that was only one of his many aliases, and that his name is Daniel Perez, and he has an extensive history of sexual abuse and much more. And the result of this trial happened in 2015, when Daniel Perez, aka Lou Castro, was sentenced with 80 years in prison. Unfortunately, all of the deaths involving Angel's Landing were still ruled accidental, but they did have a strong excuse in all of the other crimes to put him away for the rest of his life. Okay, I know this is a cult video and not a true crime video, but for Angel's Landing specifically, the beliefs were rather simple. And it wasn't even super religious, honestly. This mysterious, wealthy man just claimed that he was an angel and could predict deaths and save people near him if they did die. And he also required intimacy with children to make things happen. Although, in reality, he was killing his own cult members for insurance payouts to fund his lifestyle. So the religious beliefs are simple, but the lore of the actual story is insane. And I thought you guys would appreciate this twisted story. I know we focused on a lot of mind-bending, twisted, pseudo-religious, disgusting beliefs, so I wanted to kind of focus on the reality of the life in these cults in this story. But the more research I did, the more invested I got in this story. And, well, here we go. Before we get into the last cult of this video, I just want to say that it is the unfortunate reality that there is so many crazy and scary cults that have existed and still exist to this day. And although I hand-selected a few for this first video, I do have a sizable number of other cults I do want to discuss, although I didn't want to make this video extremely long in case it wasn't something you guys were interested in, because I haven't really discussed cults on the channel before. So if you guys are interested about more scary and truly disturbing cults, let me know in the comments or leave this video a like. This sort of engagement helps me understand what videos you guys actually want to see. But with that, let's get into our final cult of this video. Let's say you have absolutely no interest in any sort of religious group at all. Let's just say that you're interested in history. And let's say that maybe you found a particular interest with the Knights Templar, the Catholic military group tasked with protecting the Holy Grail. Perhaps that's an area of interest for you. Well, what if you were approached by some individuals who claimed to be the descendants of that military group and claimed to hold their ideals and then some? Maybe. And what if these people claimed to you that not only were they the descendants of the Knights Templar, but one of the members was also the reincarnation of Moses from the Bible and King Tut's dad? At that point, you're likely gone, but let's say you're still a little interested. But here's the catch. Even if you're potentially interested in getting around, you have to be approved. Specifically through a sizable donation, as this cult is a pretty elitist group, with a group size at its peak of only around 300 to 400 members. So unless you were really wealthy, you weren't even able to hear them, because they believed that only the richest were even worthy of hearing their message. This was the message of the Order of the Solar Temple, a Neo-Templar movement and a cult. This group had members in Canada, Switzerland, and France. One of the founders of this cult actually had a child with another cult member and believed that this child was a perfect child and that it was a higher being, and that any children that were to happen within the cult would be higher beings as well too, to help his daughter on her purpose. The cult grew and grew, and over time there was a lot of mismanagement happening between the two founders who didn't speak much about the direction of the cult. One leader was focusing on the inner workings of the cult, specifically the meditations and ceremonies, and the other leader was focused on the creative process, essentially running seminars and spreading the message of their special Because this cult required very significant financial backing, members started to become uneasy on where their money was going, as the cult seemed to have not been growing as much as it once was. And this perfect higher-level baby is now a teenager. She was starting to rebel against her own father as well. And in 1991, one of the members actually sued the group, which definitely started to show the writing on the wall for this elitist cult. And the next year, in 1992, one of the cult leaders was actually arrested for trying to buy illegal firearms in Canada, which is some unfortunate foreshadowing for what's about to happen. Later that year, people were becoming more and more restless, as not only were they unsure about where their money was going, but at this point there were so many unfulfilled spiritual promises that people were starting to believe any of the claims of these cult leaders. This is where things get dark. As the cult was beginning to crumble and they were losing members and backing, they felt that they needed to figure out something quick. And they decided that they needed to have a transition within their movement. This was a transition to another world. At this point, they began to prepare themselves and certain high-ranking people within the Solar Temple that they believed would be highly favored in this new world, aka people that they probably thought they could manipulate. While they were telling their members about how to transition into this new world, they were also planning how they would get revenge for those who they felt betrayed, aka people who saw through the lies. And the spree of this cult's revenge, starting with high-ranking cult members showing up at the door of previous cult members and stabbing their 5-month-old baby in the heart, as the leader of the Solar Temple claimed that this baby was the Antichrist, when in reality, the parents of this baby, who were also murdered in this horrific event, were simply people who didn't listen to the Solar Temple's demands, which were that they didn't get married and didn't have this baby because it wasn't what the higher beings wanted. It was essentially a power struggle that these former members were no longer interested in playing. After this horrific murder, there was other instances of strange murder suicides until one of the most insane events associated with this cult happened. On the 5th of October in 1994, 23 people were found dead in a burning chalet in Switzerland. Their bodies were arranged in a circle, and they were all wearing ceremonial robes. After this mass death event, which was more murder than suicide, as most of the participants in this group didn't realize that they were going to be killed and left in a building that would be set on fire. Regardless, in total, 74 people died over the course of the multiple murders and mass murder suicides that happened because of the order of the Solar Temple. And it's not even known how many of these deaths were suicides and how many of these deaths were murders. Because the founders of this cult were killed in these rituals and any of the remaining members went into hiding, the authorities were stumped at what to do because there was nobody to charge and not much that they could do, as most of the participants were gone as well. The result was an extremely strengthened anti-cult movement in Europe, specifically in Francophone Europe. As this event was extremely publicized, the word was finally out about the danger that can be caused by cults. I suppose the one true silver lining about cults is the fact that they always seem to be self-imploding, although even a few moments of existence for the cults that I mentioned today are longer than they should have ever existed. None of these people needed to be hurt, psychologically damaged, abused, assaulted, or killed. And if anything, I hope this video shines a small light on the terrifying world of cults, manipulation, and abuse that's possible. If you enjoyed this video about around the world, feel free to check out this video about the scariest drugs you've never heard of. We actually have a full 4-part series on this topic, and it's really interesting. Thank you guys so much for watching, and as always, trust me, bro.
Name 3 items in an emergency kit.
Water, and a flashlight.
The craziest urban legends you've never heard. It's the mid-1980s, and you and your friends are stumbling home after a long night of drinking. You're walking through the dimly lit streets when you notice something in the distance. Your friend is joking with you and talking about how wasted he is, but something catches your eye. You see a woman on the other side of the road and you recognize her from inside the bar. She appears to be using a payphone, but it's not quite working. As you get closer, you stop your friend's rambling, ask him if you think you should see if he is. Your friend says to leave her alone. You have an odd feeling, and before you are even close enough to yell across the road, asking if she needs help, you notice a car drive up. An ambulance. But this was no regular ambulance. This ambulance was unmarked, fully black, with dark tinted windows. The ambulance pulled up right in front of this woman at the payphone, and almost as quickly as it appeared, it drove off. And you notice the woman was gone too. In this instance, you have just witnessed another victim of the black ambulance. The Black Ambulance is an urban legend from Czechoslovakia and Romania that became popular in the 1980s. And the story claimed that a mysterious black ambulance with tinted windows and no markings would roam the streets at night, abducting people, particularly people that were alone and vulnerable. Witnesses who alleged to have saw the black ambulance said that they even saw people be forced into the ambulance and even heard cries for help from within. This interesting legend spread quickly through word of mouth, which fueled local rumors, which then spread to nationwide media. The fear of being targeted by the black ambulance actually caused people to be more vigilant and take extra precautions when going out, specifically at night. With this being an urban legend, there is no concrete evidence to support the existence of the black ambulance, but there is numerous reports made stating a sighting or even an abduction done by the ambulance. The exact origin of this urban legend isn't fully known, but it's suggested that it may have been a manifestation of the social unrest in Czechoslovakia at the time, which is now obviously the Czech Republic and Slovakia. Personally, I think the black ambulance is the perfect urban legend because it's just on the verge of believable. Organ harvesting is a real thing, and unfortunately, so is people being abducted. And I mean, ambulances are real too. And if you heard multiple rumors from people you knew about sightings of this mysterious black ambulance, you may think twice before writing it off entirely. The black ambulance is creepy, but fortunately, you are not its victim. At least that time. Not too long after your drinking days in Prague, you go on a trip to Mexico with your friend. The same friend, actually. You just finished a big night on the town in Mexico City, and once again, you're tipsy, and you and your friend are walking home. You saved money on the vacation by getting a cheap hotel a little bit outside of town, and for some reason this night you were just unable to find a taxi. So you and your friend were in for a long walk. On this walk, you get further and further outside of town when the city lights begin to fade and the darkness begins to swallow up the horizon in front of you. It's at this time when you're walking down the road where you notice a red car. You had no plans of hitchhiking and you didn't signal to this vehicle, but as they drive past you, they stop. You don't necessarily even plan on walking up to the vehicle, but they're parked directly in your path. And as you walk by the car, you notice that this red car is full of beautiful women. And the car conveniently has 2 seats available for you and your friend. They tell you not only that they can give you a ride, but that they can make all of your dreams come true. Because you're tipsy and half tired, you need to take a double take to make sure this is even real. Your friend is already in the car before you even had the chance to ponder the opportunity, and with some hesitation, you get in the vehicle as well. These women ask where you're going and begin to give you a ride in the direction you were going. Only a few minutes into this drive though, the women become quiet and take a turn onto a road that you didn't instruct them to. It's at this point when they begin speaking in a language you've never heard before and you get an odd feeling. This will be the last thing you remember. I think it's obvious that this was no regular encounter. This was the experience of the victim of the red car, an urban legend from Mexico. This urban legend involves a red car that travels between Mexico City and Cuernavaca, specifically looking for men. The car is full of women, but not ordinary women. These women are witches, and they're looking to pick up men for demonic rituals. They will pick up men that they find and offer them anything they want. They'll say basically anything to get these men in the car. But their intentions are, as you may have guessed, devious. Every man that enters this mysterious red vehicle is found lifeless on the side of the road later that same night. These bodies are typically found beaten to death with bruises, cuts, and arcane symbols carved into them. Obviously signs of a ritualistic sacrifice from these witches. Like the Black Ambulance, the exact origin of this urban legend is unknown, but its purpose is likely to serve as a cautionary tale against taking random back roads alone at night, or even getting in mysterious cars with mysterious women, which is an interesting twist. I thought I'd put the 2 vehicle-based urban legends together because I thought they were fitting in this story. Whether you're in the Czech Republic in the 1980s or Mexico in the modern day, don't get in black ambulances or mysterious red vehicles, especially if women are claiming to make your dreams come true, because that always comes with a price. And in this case, that price is your life. But these obscure urban legends are only the tip of the iceberg. Let's switch things up a bit. The year is 1958, and it's just the beginning of the gold rush in Arizona. The gold rush is popularly known for the opportunities of riches and prospecting and Minecraft in real life. But most people don't understand the harsh reality of the gold rush. Not only was finding gold itself particularly hard, which led a lot of miners to actually find silver and copper instead, but these times where people would move into remote locations, specifically in harsh climates like in the middle of the desert, typically came with the spread of disease, malnutrition due to lack of supplies, poor availability to water and any sort of healthcare, and extremely dangerous working conditions to say the least. Trying to get rich off the gold rush was definitely not for the faint of heart. You and your family are moving out west because even where you were at before, you were starving and not making ends meet. So moving to the middle of the desert to at least have an opportunity to make money at least sounded like a little bit of hope. You move your wife and 2 children into a place known as Luna's Canyon, which is ironic because that's the same name as your wife. Luna. Your wife, Luna, was a homemaker, taking care of her 2 children, homeschooling them, cooking for them, preparing what she could around the house, and ultimately being the best mother she could be. And your job was to get the gold. You would go on 2-week trips at a time, taking your mule into the mines and hoping for the best. During these 2 weeks, you would sometimes find plenty of material and come back home for a week or so and have the best week you've ever had, with an abundance of food, warmth, and a sense of hope and pride. And at the end of other 2-week trips, you would be almost coming home empty-handed, letting your wife know that you're gonna have to eat sparse for the next month. Regardless, you and your family always figured it out. That was until one time. It was a day like any other. You're packing up your mule, saying goodbye to your kids and your wife, going on another 2-week expedition. And you had particularly high hopes for this expedition. Although, as you get to the mine, you begin searching and looking, and you find the biggest gold nugget you've ever seen before. You consider even going home early, as this is more than a year's worth of income just in one nugget. This is amazing. But before you could even fully process what you have just found, you heard a cracking noise. And before you could even process what that noise could have meant, the mine collapsed on top of you, killing you instantly. This may be where your story ends, but it's not the end of the urban legend. Back home, your wife has no idea what's going on and is going about her life business as usual. Although after the 2 weeks pass and you're not home, she begins to get a bit anxious. But she leaves. 3 weeks after you've gone, all food is essentially gone. You haven't eaten in days, and now any food that you could have fed your kids is gone too. Your wife is beginning to lose hope, and her sanity is starting to slip as well too. Her kids are making it very well known that they are hungry and tired and miss their dad. And you too are extremely hungry, extremely tired, and now at a loss for what to do. That was until one fateful night. Your wife, Luna, seemed to have broken. After another night of being unable to sleep, she slipped out of her clothes and put on her wedding dress of all things. She grabbed the biggest knife she could find in the kitchen, and she used that knife on her 2 children. She slain her own children and then cut them up into small pieces and brought them to a nearby pond where she put them in the water. The blood-stained water revealed her reflection to herself, and she seemed to have snapped back into reality and realized what she had done. She screamed the most blood-curdling scream you've ever heard, and almost instantly after passed out and died from starvation. And even with the entire family now being gone, the urban legend still isn't over. Today, this canyon is known as Slaughterhouse Canyon, and it is said that the spirits of this family still haunts the area. And on particularly quiet nights, if you listen closely, you can still hear the blood-curdling screams of the mother as she realized what she had done. And on even rarer occasions, you may even hear a quiet sobbing sound. The legend of Slaughterhouse Canyon is definitely creepy and obviously scary, and to me, seems like reason enough to not visit this specific canyon in Arizona. But of course, there's weird people who hear stories like this and make it a mission to go to these locations. But who knows, maybe I'm the weird one, not one. Slaughterhouse Canyon is just 12 minutes from Kingman, Arizona, and it is a popular spot for ghost hunting. This urban legend is definitely tragic and pretty morbid to say the least. This honestly reminds me of La Llorona, which is actually a Spanish urban legend I've covered a long time ago. That urban legend was actually my first ever mythical creature video, and I may or may not have pronounced it wrong. But that urban legend basically states that she drowned her own children in the lake, and then similarly realized what she had done and then drowned herself. And after her death, her ghost still haunted small bodies of water, crying and screaming at night, leading people to the water for her to drown. So definitely some similarities, but some differences there. But yeah, Slaughterhouse Canyon is creepy, and if true, is extremely tragic and unfortunate. Let's go back to Europe, because we have some unfinished business. Unfortunately, it's not anything to do with mining. However, it does involve hairy. This one's simple, so let me quickly set the scene. The year is 1950, and you're driving a car through Dartmoor, England. It's getting late, just past sunset, and you had just finished a day of hiking around Dartmoor National Park. You're heading home and heading up a particular stretch of road that is known for its curves. When all of a sudden you see 2 large, disembodied, hairy hands grab your steering wheel and violently turn them all the way to the left, making you drive off the road and flip your vehicle. In this case, fortunately, you're only banged and bruised up. In the hospital, you're being asked what exactly happened. You think it's probably wise to say nothing, but you go against your judgment and tell the nurses that large hands took the wheel of your car and forced you off the road. But instead of having sympathy, they put you in a straitjacket and a padded room. Okay, so yeah, hairy hands is weird. It's an urban legend from England and basically goes exactly as I described. The story dates back to around the 1910s, again, with no concrete origin, but stemmed out of reports of vehicles swerving uncontrollably off the road as if something else had taken control of them and their vehicle. Hairy Hands was more or less of a local rumor around Dartmoor until it gained national attention in 1921. After a series of accidents happened in the same spot, including one fatal crash of a medical officer. I couldn't find any specific reports of these hands taking control of people's vehicles, but it is claimed that this was a confession of some who had experienced accidents on this road in Dartmoor. Now, I will say, coincidentally, this road where a lot of these accidents took place were on a road that was particularly narrow and had what was known as a dangerous camber, which is essentially so with this road being relatively dangerous in nature and having accidents common there, it is likely that people may be blaming the supernatural for their accidents. And considering that this happened in the early 1900s, 1910s, 1920s, I think it's also likely that people were enjoying a beverage on the road, which likely contributed to this series of events. It kind of sounds like a drunk person's explanation for what happened too. It's almost like watching an old episode of Cops when you're home from school sick, and you just see an obviously drunk guy get pulled over for like crashing his car, and the police are like, "Sir, have you been drinking?" And the guy's just like, "No, these huge hairy hands just grabbed my wheel. It's crazy." But yeah, hairy hands is a simple urban legend that to me isn't really believable. But it's still interesting, and it's an urban legend, so I'm here to have some fun. Before we continue, I want to make two quick notes. One, if you've heard of these, you don't need to leave a comment if you've heard of them. It's okay. You're just bigger brained than the rest of us. And enjoy that fact and relive the stories that you already know. Also, if you love urban legend videos, please let me know in the comments. Because I've only made one other urban legend video, and I used to make a ton of videos about mythical creatures, but haven't done so recently. I try to make videos that you guys will enjoy, because ultimately these videos are for you. So if you ever like a specific topic I talk about, make sure you leave a comment or leave a like, because I do take note. Just look at the drug series. I made a lot of those videos because you guys love it. Okay, let's keep going. We're in Japan, and you're enjoying some fun. I guess to keep the theme of this video consistent, we're gonna enjoy some of Japan's nightlife, which if you know anything about, you know involves Japanese salarymen on the side of the road sleeping 45 minutes before they're due for their next shift. Regardless, you're living it up. You're at some Kirby, Pokemon, anime themed karaoke bar, and the night is coming to a close. But before you go, you decide to use the washroom because urinating in the street is something that you left in the past. You stumble into the washroom and walk over to the urinal. You do your business and you go over to the sink, looking at the mirror above the sink specifically. You didn't have any intentions of washing your hands, but you did want to check yourself out before you hit it off. As you're looking in the mirror, you notice the lights flicker, and suddenly you're left in darkness. Nothing in this room is visible besides strange sticky note that appears to be glowing in the dark. You don't speak Japanese, but you can read the sticky note. It says Lily-san, and to you, this can mean anything. And you just assume that this is something you have to say to turn the lights back. So you look into the mirror, not even intentionally. You're just looking in that direction because the sticky note's on the mirror. That's all you can see. And you say, Lily-san, Lily-san, Lily-san. You say it 3 times, trying to get the lights to turn back on so you can leave this bathroom. When all of a sudden the lights flicker again, and you turn around, you are met with something disturbing. Standing in front of you is the ghostly young girl. Her spirit was trapped in this mirror, and she is seeking revenge on anybody who summons her. Her skin seems to be charred and covered in bandages, and she is emanating the light and heat of a fire, and even smells like a disgusting burning smell. She walks closer to you, and you can feel the heat of this burnt child. She grabs you by your shirt and begins to walk into the mirror, where she pulls you into the other dimension. You would never see. Lily-san is an interesting Japanese urban legend, and I would kind of equate it to the Japanese version of Bloody Mary, which is interesting because it's kind of cool to see like different cultures have similar kind of ideas, which possibly adds some validity, who knows. The Lily-san urban legend was obviously popular in Japan, and revolves around a haunted mirror in a school. For the opening story, I just pretended that the person who owned this bar bought this old mirror at an antique store because it was donated by a school that was going to be demolished. That's the lore, let's put it there. But realistically, I just didn't know how I would make a story about you being an adult in Japan going into a kid's bathroom and doing this challenge. So I just figured let's just switch it up and say that's the lore of how this school's mirror got into this bar. Like I stated in the stories, the witnesses who have claimed to see Lily-san, whoever these people are, describe her as having charred skin, bandages, and a body that is emitting heat and smelling of burning flesh. This legend has kind of been popularized by school children and has a bunch of different variations, with some of them including Lily-san being able to drag you into the mirror as well. This may come as a shock to you, but there is no evidence of Lily-san's existence yet. but the story did gain popularity primarily through social media and online forums, and through that spread through school grounds, essentially. Kids telling tales. Lily Sand is a simple and kind of silly urban legend. I thought it was interesting because it, to me, struck me as the Japanese Bloody Mary, and it was cool that we had something in it. But if that doesn't tickle your fancy, then I've got one more for you. Staying in Japan, because we already blew our entire travel budget on the first 2 segments, we are once again, actually, you know what? We're not drinking this time. We're doing something else. We are just leaving the Japanese soup kitchen for a long night of feeding people in need. We did something good for once. We're switching it up. You're simply going about your business, feeling good about yourself. When you notice probably the most disturbing thing you've ever seen. You see a dog-like creature walking down the street, but with a human head. This creature is harmless, but if you try to talk to it, it will insult you. Hey, little guy. You're ugly. And after this strange encounter with this odd being, you simply go home and go to bed. Because you are a contributing member of society. You don't have time to mess with human-faced dogs or any sort of disrespect. Now, actually getting to the full point. So this creature is called the Jinmenki, not to be confused with Jenko, which we talked about in one of our drug videos. Check it out on screen. But the Jinmenki is known as the human-faced dog. This creature is also considered a yokai, which is pretty cool if you know about yokai. Basically, it just means a Japanese folklore creature. As suggested in the story, these creatures roam around the streets at night and can be harmless, but people are advised to not engage with them as they can throw insults if you try to converse. These creatures are considered bad omens and have even been blamed for misfortune and accidents since Japan's Edo period. And during the Edo period, sightings of these creatures were actually so common that there was not only media interest, but also attempts to catch these creatures. Like, not just like one guy was hunting, like not like story, like legit, like organized attempts to catch these Jinmenki. Some people believe that these creatures are actually people that were killed in accidents or treated poorly in their lives, and they have come back to express their sadness to the world, which is pretty petty in my opinion, but I mean, do you? Interestingly though, this is one of the few urban legends in this video that actually has some recorded evidence. In 1810, a historian claims that he saw a human-faced dog exhibited at a carnival sideshow that was drawing crowds and wealth for the owner of this creature. Since then, modern sightings have still continued, but primarily took place in the 80s, specifically with this creature rummaging through trash and lurking in alleyways, probably in dark places where it's not even easy to kind of tell what you're looking at. It's also claimed that this creature can run 60 miles per hour, which is just interesting. Locals speculate that this animal is actually a failed lab experiment, and others compare it to the chupacabra. This is definitely a strange urban legend. I, and probably you, have heard it. But for the sake of time, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to end it there. If you want more crazy, unheard of urban legends, please leave a comment or drop a like. And if you have a suggestion for one that you think that people don't know that you do know, drop it in the comments below. I might just talk about it in the next video. Thank you guys so much for watching. And if you want to stay up even later tonight or procrastinate even longer, check out this video on screen right now about the scariest cults from around the world. It's a crazy video about crazy cults. You're going to love it. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. And as always, trust me. Forbidden places you will never visit. Just imagine you're on a fishing boat in the Bay of Bengal. You've had a successful day and it's time to get back to shore. When all of a sudden a typhoon forms right in front of your face over the water. And before you know it, your boat has been flipped and you are essentially lost at sea. Your entire crew is gone and you're holding onto a floating board for dear life. Your energy is low from kicking and screaming and you pass out, clinging to this board. You wake up later, looking at a clear sky, and you notice you're not in the water anymore. You're on the beach, but you don't know what beach you're at because you weren't near land. You cough up some water and start to sit up when you realize a small bunch of blobs in the distance. You see them approach and you realize that it's people, but not people you've seen before. The closer you get, the more you realize that these people are barely clothed and wielding sticks and bows. Did you time travel? Unfortunately not. You have just washed up on North Sentinel. North Sentinel Island is the first location on this list, and it is likely one of the most well-known forbidden places in the entire world. Oh, and as far as the fisherman who washed up on the beach, yeah, his skull is now a pendant for one of the Sentinelese. North Sentinel Island is one of the Andaman Islands in the Indian archipelago in the Bay of Bengal, which also includes some other smaller islands as well. What makes North Sentinel Island so unique is the fact that it's solely occupied by a voluntarily isolated indigenous tribe who are believed to have been there for over 60,000 years. These people are known as the Sentinelese, and they have made their wishes known by force, specifically by killing anybody who tries to contact them or even come close. They have made their message so clear that the Indian Navy patrols the area around the North Sentinel Island to protect it from people trying to enter it. And the Indian government does not prosecute any Sentinelese people for killing people that try to step ashore. That's insane that this uncontacted tribe is essentially immune to the law. The Sentinelese have not only attacked people that have stepped on shore, but have also repeatedly attacked approaching vessels, whether those be fishing boats or simply any sort of low-flying helicopter or plane in the range of their bows and arrows. The story I told at the beginning of this segment is actually inspired by real events that took place in 2006. During this time, Sentinelese Islanders killed 2 fishermen whose boats drifted ashore. And like the intro story, this approach wasn't even intentional. Although, speaking of intentionally visiting Sentinelese, in 2018, a 26-year-old man named John Chu, who was an American Christian missionary, tried on 3 separate attempts to visit the North Sentinelese people, likely to convert them to Christianity, but unfortunately on his 3rd trip, which he was successfully able to approach these people, he was unsurprisingly murdered, which is obviously unfortunate. But this young man was warned by the Indian government and other authorities. In 1956, there was an Islands Protection of Aboriginal Tribes regulation that was put in place that restricted any approach closer than 5 nautical miles, which is essentially anywhere within a 10-kilometer radius of the island. The biggest reason why this regulation was put in place is to protect the Sentinelese people from mainland diseases. Due to the severity of the isolation of North Sentinel Island, they have almost no immunity to any modern-day disease or germ that may be on you or I right now. So if you were to visit North Sentinel Island, there's a very likely chance that even spending time around them, breathing near them, shaking one of their hands, could lead to the death of the entire population of the Sentinelese people simply by spreading germs. North Sentinel Island is a forbidden location that I personally don't intend on breaking any rules to visit. But what if fishing wasn't your speed? Perhaps you are more interested in agriculture, specifically Chinese agriculture. The year is 1974, and you are simply on your farm. And what's a good farm without a well? So, you start digging a well. However, this day was different. As you start digging, you notice something that is about to uncover one of the largest excavation projects of all time. And then you go deeper and you notice hardened fragments of terracotta. And then you notice bronze arrowheads. And then terracotta bricks. Well, in that case, you just discovered the tomb of Qin Shi Huang, the first Qin emperor of China. These artifacts were submitted to the government, and shortly after, archaeologists arrived. And although they were curious and interested about the artifacts that may have laid underground, they were not at all prepared for what they were about to find. What they found was a massive necropolis, the size of a small city, with a plethora of artifacts, weapons, vehicles, and most famously, terracotta soldiers. There is estimated to be over 8,000 terracotta soldiers in total, but that actual figure is unknown because this mausoleum is still not fully excavated and may never be. Keep in mind, this excavation has been going on since 1974 and still continues to this day. This mausoleum was built from 246 to 208 BC. The mausoleum mirrored the city of Jianyang with an inner and outer city structure. And although this outer and inner city structure where the terracotta soldiers have been found has began to be excavated, one place that has never been touched was the tomb itself. This tomb is at the very center of the complex, and it is very large. In case the thousands of terracotta soldiers were not enough of a sign, the late Qin Shi Huang did not want people entering his tomb. At least, not without a fight, I guess. So I suppose that begs the question, why did the government keep excavating? Well, the 3 reasons they listed publicly were the following. One was the fact that this area was a seismic zone, and they needed to remove these historic artifacts to protect them. The next reason was for tourism, to potentially make it something that people could visit and appreciate. And the third reason was to prevent grave robbing, essentially theorizing that if they didn't take it, somebody else would. In case the 8,000 terracotta soldiers didn't make this obvious, this mausoleum is massive. The replica inner city is over 2.5 kilometers in circumference, and the outer city is over 6.3 kilometers in circumference, which is insane for a mausoleum. Even the tomb itself is massive. It's believed to be 80 meters east to west and 50 meters north to south. and 15 meters tall on the inside. However, the interior height is debated. It is a very real possibility that we will never be able to know what's inside the tomb, simply because of limitations in archaeological abilities, specifically the risk of destroying so many other artifacts just to get inside the tomb. But we do have historical accounts of what is said to be inside the tomb, which is the following. The Emperor's tomb is surrounded by rivers of liquid mercury, which was the Emperor's immortality elixir of choice. Which, just quick side note, yeah, this Emperor was literally drinking mercury to try to extend his life, which ironically ended up causing him to go crazy and die. But okay, back to the historical account. There is a domed ceiling representing celestial bodies made from pearls and precious gems. The floor has a design of the entire map of his empire. And besides all of his precious belongings and stunning architecture, there was of course claims of booby traps, specifically crossbow traps that would be activated if anybody tried to enter the tomb, which would result in them, of course, being shot and killed. Here's where things get interesting. These accounts were of course questionable, and archaeologists were suspicious. But after probing the soil near the tomb, it was confirmed that the mercury levels in the soil were 100 times over the normal level, giving some credibility to these historic claims, which also gives credibility to the fact that there may be booby traps, which has essentially spooked archaeologists, as they believe these traps would be fully functioning, which I personally find hard to believe, but I also wouldn't risk it either. This tomb is listed as a World Heritage Site and is therefore protected by legal entities. But that's not the only reason why you're not able to go here. Unlike North Sentinel Island, which is relatively easy to visit if you have a boat or know somebody with a boat, the tomb of Qin Shi Huang is simply unable to be reached, at least to any regular person with reasonable means. What I mean is, of course, if you hypothetically had a bunch of dynamite, you could blow it up, but obviously that's not realistic. Or is it? No. Unless... Just kidding. Therefore, you're not only not allowed to visit it, you're also not able, making it a perfect entry for this list. Let's hope that you got your sea legs back, because we're hitting the water again. This time, we're going to a remote island intentionally, although it's not off the coast of India. This island is actually in the Arctic Circle. This island is known as Spitsbergen, and it's tucked away in the Arctic Svalbard archipelago. And if you're wondering why we're going here, it's primarily because of your passion for agriculture. Spitsbergen is the home of the Svalbard Global Seed Vault, and this seed vault is one of the most interesting places in the entire world. It is kind of an interesting take on the Doomsday Vault. In short, it's an ultra-secure facility with the sole purpose of being a safeguard for global crop diversity by storing duplicates of every known seed. This place is really just a sperm bank for plants or other stuff like that. The Seed Vault is actually a partnership between the Norwegian government and Crop Trust, which is a genetic resource center, which sounds evil, but probably isn't. But it might be. This facility is epic, and if you like brutalist architecture, you are going to love this building. It's essentially a concrete slab sticking out the side of a mountain in the middle of an uninhabited Arctic wasteland. To me, it seems like a pretty cool place to store some stuff. The entire facility goes almost 400 feet into the side of a mountain, and a majority of this facility is kept at negative 18 degrees Celsius, as that is the recommended temperature to store seeds. I guess, I don't know, I'm not a seed expert. One unique failsafe about this facility that I think is pretty cool is the fact that even if all the refrigeration units failed today, the seed vault would still be completely protected because it is stored within permafrost, meaning that it's very well insulated and very cold. Now, if only the people that designed this designed the Death Star too. As of 2022, there is over 1.2 million unique types of seeds in this facility. And interestingly, and potentially somewhat obviously, this facility is not manned. It is autonomous, and I suppose that's a good thing considering the fact that it's literally in the middle of nowhere, always kept at deadly temperatures with basically nothing around you. This seed bank is a really unique modern invention that I think serves a genuine purpose that hopefully we will never need, but could very well serve a massive role in the development of humanity if it ever came to it. I think it goes without saying that this seed vault is completely off limits. Not only is it in an extremely remote location in a part of the world that's already hard to navigate and travel to, but the facility itself is extremely secure. So unfortunately, you won't be able to check out the cool seed collection, but that's okay. And you're a person of culture. Modern archives and architecture is cool, but you want history. You want to see some cool stuff and some old stuff. And for that exact reason, we're going to France. The date is September 12th, 1940. And you and your trusty dog are on a walk like any other day. Your dog notices a hole left by an uprooted tree, and you notice something rather interesting, but you don't bother at the moment. You go home and ponder on what you may have saw and decide that you have some unfinished business, and you return to that uprooted tree with 3 of your best friends. You begin digging, a common theme in this video, I suppose, and notice that this uprooted tree has a lot below it. Specifically, a 15-meter deep cave shaft. You and your friends are brave, and you enter the cave and start exploring. And not only do you see some cool stalactites and stalagmites and light brights, but you also see interesting designs on the walls. Those designs were ancient cave paintings depicting animals. This cave is known as Lascaux Cave, and it is a network of caves in southwestern France with over 600 cave paintings found on the interior walls of its caves. It is suggested that these paintings were not made all at once and that they were the combined effort of many generations. And although they haven't been able to quite pinpoint a date for each and every one of these paintings, the general consensus is that these paintings are anywhere from 17 to 22,000 years old, which is so cool. There was an amount of time where this cave was actually open to the public for tours, but over time, due to carbon dioxide, heat, humidity, and other contaminants produced by the 1,200 visitors that visited these caves a day, the paintings were essentially disintegrating and were being visibly damaged. Therefore, the cave was closed to the public in 1963. Since then, the paintings have been restored to their original state and a monitoring system has been put in place. It's actually just a baguette holding a door closed. I don't know, I'm sure they've got something amazing. So yeah, unless you're able to travel at least 70 years into the past, you're not going to be seeing these original 22,000-year-old paintings. However, this story does have a bit of a hack, because obviously there was demand for these cave tours, and that wasn't going anywhere anytime soon. So what the authorities actually did was create exact replicas of this cave system for people to explore and visit without any risk of the originals being damaged, which is honestly pretty cool. But what isn't cool is snakes. And since 2 out of the 4 entries have been on islands, let's add another one to the list and combine the 2. Snakes in an island. You know what that gets you? You're right. Snake Island. No, not the island boy's haircut. Snake Island is an island, I know. And it is also off the coast of Brazil. The island is famous for, of course, its large population of venomous snakes, specifically the golden lancehead pit viper. And what's interesting is that this island is the only known natural home for this breed of snakes. But there is a bit of mystery surrounding this island. How exactly did these snakes get here, and why is there so many of them? It's not called Snake Island because there's a few. It's called Snake Island because it's only inhabited by snakes, and a lot of them. The island is roughly 106 acres in area, and is believed to be the home of around 400,000 snakes, although that number more recently has been debated. But if you ask me, I don't think we're getting an accurate head count anytime soon. Point being, there is a lot of snakes on this island. But the question remains, how did these snakes get here? And I hope you brought your tissues, because it's kind of a sad story. Basically, when the Portuguese colonized Brazil, the Portuguese made all of the native Brazilians disown their pet snakes. Obviously outraged, the native Brazilians didn't give up their snakes without a fight, and they banded up all of their snakes and sent them off to sea on a raft, hoping that they would find a better life. After a few days, this raft of about 500,000 snakes washed up ashore on this uninhabited island, and the rest is history. I totally just made all of that up. The real reason why there is so many snakes on this island is much more simple. During the last ice age, this island, which is now 33 kilometers off the coast of Brazil, was actually connected to the mainland. But near the end of the ice age, as water levels started to rise, the snakes essentially became trapped on this island. Their population grew due to a lack of natural predators. Fortunately, these snakes weren't the only animals on the island. There was actually a plethora of ladders. But unfortunately, after a few dangerous games of snakes and ladders, only the snakes remained. I don't know why I'm lying so much in this video. Hopefully you can tell fact from fiction. Sure, there's a lot of snakes on an island, but there's a lot of snakes on a plane too. People still on the plane. Why is there not people on this island? Well, similar to North Sentinel Island, Snake Island is off limits to any civilians. The Brazilian Navy claims that this is for the protection of both the snakes and the people that may potentially try to access the island. The only people that are advised to go on the island have to be vetted by the Institute for Biodiversity Conservation, which I'm assuming is no easy task. And if you try to go the other way, well, you'll have to deal with the Brazilian Navy. And similar to North Sentinel Island, if the snakes kill you, the Brazilian Navy is not going to put them in jail. That's crazy that now twice on this list, there is groups of people that are immune to the law simply because they got an island. I wonder if there's any more recent examples of people with islands breaking the law. That's an interesting phenomenon, but let's keep moving. Wait, okay, last thing I'm gonna say about Snake Island. Making fake maps claiming that there is buried treasure on this remote island, when in reality, it's actually just Snake Island, would be a hilarious prank. Not in the modern day, but definitely pirate times, dude. This was a pirate time banger of a prank, guaranteed. You know what? We're on the topic of islands. Last island, one last island for the list. Palette cleanse, we'll go through it quick. Morgan Island. No story, no nothing. Just straight up facts. Morgan Island is also known as Monkey Island. And if you can't guess why it's called that, you may live on Monkey Island. Monkey Island is famous for, of course, its population of free-ranged monkeys. It is completely uninhabited by people, and this island is protected by the Department of Natural Resources and the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, which use it for public health research, which unfortunately is basically just animal testing. Boo. Monkey Island, unlike Snake Island, is not naturally occurring, and actually has a very odd origin story. To put it bluntly, there was a lot of monkeys in Puerto Rico that were carrying hepatitis B, and it was becoming so much of a problem that there was frequent outbreaks. So what is the most logical and reasonable next step? Well, according to some people in 1979, the best idea was to capture 1,400 monkeys and relocate them to a remote island in South Carolina. And ladies and gentlemen, Morgan Island, aka Monkey Island. So in case you ever wanted to be surrounded by over 1,000 monkeys with hepatitis, Morgan Island definitely needs to be on your travel wish list. But you don't just want to go to remote islands full of uncontacted tribes or a plethora of dangerous animals, and you don't want to go to rural China, and you don't like the cold, so Norway's out too. Well, if that's the case, then I have one last location for you. And if you're a Reddit meme lord, then you're going to be right at home. This last forbidden location takes us to a salt flat in the middle of Nevada. The salt flat is known as Groom Lake, and what makes this salt flat relevant to this video is what's built on the salt flat, that being a Nevada test and training range. But there's military bases everywhere, so what makes this one so special? This test and training range is home to one of the most popular and highly classified United States Air Force bases, most commonly known as Area 51. Interestingly, Area 51 was never considered a secret base. However, it is the home for some of the most secret and sensitive documents that pertain to military intel in the United States. The origin of the name Area 51 is actually unknown. However, according to the CIA, the proper names for the facility are Homey Airport and Groom Lake. The primary initial purpose of Area 51 was a testing ground for Project Aquatone, the development of the Lockheed U-2, which was one of the most iconic spy planes of all time, and still has a lot of mystery surrounding it, almost 70 years later. Since then, this area has gained a lot more popularity, and due to the secrecy surrounding it, there has been no shortage of questions, mysteries, and conspiracy theories surrounding the happenings of this military base. Obviously, with the most famous examples being its affiliation with aliens. I honestly wish I had more to talk about, but facts about this location are kind of hard to come by, and I don't think I need to explain why a military base with sensitive information is off limits. But I do find it kind of interesting that, although this is a perfect entry for this video, it's a bit of a catch-22, because for any random civilian, Area 51 is a place you will never even get close to, at least not alive. But for hundreds of people, this is a place they come every single day. It's their job. But that's a different story. In 2019, there was actually a large movement for people with way too much free time to storm Area 51 to get answers and see an alien for themselves. This movement was heavily meme-based, but was still very real. On the night of the actual event, over 1,500 people showed up at the border of Area 51, primarily partying and enjoying the scenery, although some took it more serious than others. At the end of the event, nobody got in, surprisingly nobody died, and 7 people were arrested. It was a mostly peaceful meme, but I'm sure when all of this was gaining traction and popularity online, some government employees were definitely starting to sweat a bit. But speaking of sweat, I do have a confession. I may or may not have gotten really sweaty researching for this video, and I found way more entries than I could ever put into one video. But luckily for you, I have the ability to make more videos. So if you guys really enjoyed this video and want to see more forbidden locations, then I would be more than happy to make a part 2 and share with you some likely even more interesting, strange, and some downright scary locations that you or anybody else will likely never visit. So if that's something you want, let me know in the comments or leave this video a like, and I'll be sure to get on that. But with that being said, thank you guys so much for watching this video. I learned a lot researching these places, and I hope you guys learned something too. If you're looking for another excuse to keep procrastinating, I recommend checking out this video on screen. It's about what it was like to get rich in every time period, specifically how people would accumulate Cryptids from every state in the United States of America. Alabama. One of the most famous cryptids in Alabama is known as the White Thang, or the White Thang of Alabama. Supposedly, the White Thang is the most famous cryptid from Alabama. The creature has been spotted throughout the 1990s, and the local news, WAFF48, has published articles discussing it. One of the articles discussed how the White Thang and the Sasquatch are different, but how they may be potentially distantly related. Oh, yeah, and if you can tell by the pictures on screen, White Thang is essentially just a big Bigfoot, but he's white, hence the name. Alaska. One of the most interesting cryptids from Alaska is known as Tizaruk, and it is believed to be a sea serpent reported from the subarctic coastal waters of King and Nunavut Islands in the Bering Sea, off the Pacific coast of Alaska. People that have claimed to see Tizaruk typically claim to either only see their head and neck or occasionally the tail. Therefore, the general form of this animal is unknown, but it can allegedly rise out of the water almost 7 to 8 feet. Its head is snake-like and its tail is flippered, but the Tezerek has also been described as a giant caterpillar or worm-like creature. This is essentially the Loch Ness Monster of Alaska. There isn't really much known about this creature, but I thought it would be more interesting than another Bigfoot variant, just so this list isn't full of them. Arizona, the Mogollon Monster. The Mogollon Monster is commonly described as a large bipedal creature, which means it walks on 2 feet. Originally, I thought that meant it had 2 penises, but it turns out he's not that cool. It's also described as being over 7 feet tall with large red eyes. Its body is said to be covered with long black or reddish brown hair, with the exclusion of hair on its chest, face, feet, or hands. Reports claim it also has a strong pungent odor like dead fish, skunk, bad body odor, or even decaying peat moss, or the musk of a snapping turtle. Some people claim that the creature is allegedly nocturnal, omnivorous, and territorial, and sometimes violent. In numerous reports, the monster has been said to emit a blood-curdling scream, described as sounding like a woman in great distress. The Mogollon Monster is also known as the Arizona Bigfoot, and is really just an interesting variant of Bigfoot, with very similar qualities. Arkansas, the White River Monster. An urban legend in Arkansas is known as the White River Monster, and it's a large creature reportedly first spotted off the banks of the White River near Newport, Arkansas. The White River Monster is reported as having gray skin and as wide as a car and as long as 3 cars. And as news reports spread about this monster, the city began construction on a huge rope and net, but the program actually ended due to a lack of materials and funding. The creature was first spotted in 1915 and is even believed to have an impact on the Civil War. During the Civil War, the White River was used often for transportation, and the monster is supposedly blamed for overturning a boat. The monster was notably spotted again in 1937 and 1971, and there's over 100 confirmed sightings from 1915 to present day. Basically, one of your run-of-the-mill interesting river cryptids. California, the Dark Watchers. I actually have mentioned the Dark Watchers before on my channel, but I like them, so I'm going to mention them again. Oh, and the video I talked about them in is Scariest Mythical Creatures from Around the World, Part 3. The Dark Watchers are tall, sometimes giant-sized, featureless dark silhouettes often seen wearing brimmed hats or even carrying walking sticks. They're only seen during sunrise or sunset, and they are motionless, watching travelers from the horizon, typically seen along the Santa Lucia mountain range. The legend states that no one has been able to see them up close, and if you approach them, they vanish. These are harmless cryptids, and some believe they are simply a reminder that you are not alone in these woods, and to respect nature and your surroundings, or to be aware at all times. They serve as more or less of a gentle warning, and although creepy, I think they're pretty cool. Colorado, Slide Rock Bolter. Slide Rock Bolter is a really strange cryptid from lumberjack folklore, primarily during the 19th and 20th centuries. It is a creature that is believed to live in the mountains of Colorado, but only on mountains with a slope at an angle greater than 45 degrees. It has a huge head, small eyes, a big mouth, and a tail similar to a dolphin with big grab hooks. The best way to describe this cryptid is honestly just a big land whale that slides down mountains to eat people. This creature is said to have caused great unease amongst tourists visiting the mountains of Colorado, and it will often remain motionless for days at a time until groups of tourists walk by its path. At that point, it will release its hooks from the top of the mountain and slide down the mountain to gulp up the entire group of tourists, or at least so the legend goes. This is definitely an interesting cryptid, but it's kind of funny. And if you plan on going to the mountains of Colorado soon, make sure you get your protractor out to make sure the angle is less than 40 degrees. Or at least look out for any whale-looking things up the mountain. Connecticut, the Melonheads. The Melonheads are actually a folklore that exists in Ohio, Michigan, and Connecticut, but for this segment, we're only going to be focusing on the ones in Connecticut. The Melonheads are described as small humanoid beings with bulbous heads who occasionally emerge from hiding places and attack people. That's the basic gist. But in Connecticut specifically, according to one telling of the myth, Fairfield County was the location of an asylum for the criminally insane that burned down in the fall of 1960, resulting in the death of all of the staff and most of the patients, except for 10 of 20 inmates unaccounted for, which supposedly supposedly had survived and escaped into the woods. The legend states that the Melonheads' appearance is a result of them resorting to cannibalism in order to survive the harsh winters in the region and inbreeding, which caused their heads to swell up and deform. Less of a cryptid, more of like a fairy tale, mythical creature thing. If I haven't made it obvious yet, I'm kind of using the terms interchangeably. But yeah, that's the Melonheads. Definitely strange. Delaware, the Pukwudgie. If there's any Exploring with Josh fans watching this video, you might be familiar with the Pukwudgie. Pukwudgies are mythical creatures with shape-shifting abilities, also known for luring people to their deaths using magic and attacking people with poison arrows. They may seem initially friendly, but they turn hostile towards humans. Legend warns against annoying them while they are being friendly, as they retaliate with mischief and harm. Pukwudgie itself roughly translates to little man of the woods that vanishes. And as far as appearance goes, looks like a human-like creature, albeit much shorter, much hairier, and sometimes seen either naked or with very primal-esque clothing. So if you're ever in Delaware or even live in Delaware, make sure you watch out for little elf-looking, mischievous little guys in the woods. Florida, the Muck Monster. In late August of 2009, two members of a non-profit called Lagoon Keepers were attempting to remove what they thought were a log from the Lake Worth Lagoon in Palm Beach, Florida. That log proceeded to give the two non-profit members a runaround of the entire lake, diving deep whenever the boat came within 10 feet of it. During the chase, one of the men called this monster the elusive Muck Monster, and the other man filmed the encounter and put it online. The news picked up the story, and the city quickly took note and did almost everything they could to profit off of the situation. T-shirts were sold, specialty drinks were made in bars, and the city even installed viewfinders along the water. The only real visual that we have on this creature is its wood-like appearance from part of its back poking through the water briefly, which to me seems similar to a snapping turtle, but who knows. So anyways, this creature did end up being pretty good publicity and a decent boost in tourism, which is kind of funny. But as far as the cryptid goes, there's not much information. Georgia, Altamahaha, or Alti. Basically just the Loch Ness Monster of Georgia. It's believed to live in small streams and abandoned rice fields, and sightings are few and far between. There's not a ton of information about this besides the fact that it's extremely similar to the Loch Ness Monster, supposedly. But yeah, this one's kind of uninspired. Moving on. Hawaii. Menehune. Okay, this one's actually cool. Menehune are essentially small dwarves that live in the valleys and rural areas of Hawaii, hidden far, far away from human settlements. The Menehune are also described as superb craftspeople, building temples, fish ponds, roads, canoes, and houses. Some of these structures that Hawaiian folklore attributed to the Menehune existed. They were said to be in Hawaii before settlers from Polynesia migrated many centuries ago. Their favorite food is banana, but they also like fish. Legend has it is that the Menehune only appear during night, and that is when they spend their hours crafting masterpieces. Not much more is known about the Menehune, but I think they're pretty cool dudes. They're just doing their thing, living in a cool place, building cool stuff. You can't hate that. Good job, Hawaii. That's a cool cryptid, or folklore, or mythical creature, or whatever. Idaho. Charlie. Charlie, much like Alti, is basically just a Loch Ness Monster dupe, not worth mentioning. Sorry, Idaho. Do better. I honestly thought they would have some sort of potato monster, and maybe they do, but I didn't see it. Illinois. The Enfield Horror. This creature is described as having 3 legs, a short body, 2 short arms, and 2 pink eyes as big as flashlights. It stands at 4.5 feet tall and is grayish in color. It's definitely a gross and droopy looking creature, and it's honestly pretty creepy as well. Its first sighting was in the early 1970s in the small town of Enfield, Illinois, hence the name. During one of the first sightings, a very convincing story got out and got media attention, and this caused a lot of hunters to become excited the Enfield Horror. For a while, tourists traveled and hunters began hunting, both looking for this gray creature in the woods. All of these hunts were unsuccessful, and as the hunting and tourism enthusiasm died down, 4 more sightings were reported since. Indiana. Mesha Kennebec. Mesha Kennebec, also known as the Manitou Monster, is an Indiana cryptid that is said to live in Lake Manitou for over centuries, being spotted by Native Americans and early settlers. By those who have seen it, it's been described as 60 feet long with the head of a bull with a serpent body. It is more or less of your run-of-the-mill lake monster, but it wasn't an exact ripoff of Loch Ness Monster, so I thought I'd give it a bit more. It's pretty cool, and the Native American ties are always interesting because their folklore is great, but that's about all I got. Iowa. Van Meter Monster. The Van Meter Monster is reported to be a 9-foot tall, bat-like creature, also known as the Van Meter Visitor. This creature was said to shoot light from its horns and is immune to bullets. Witnesses made plaster casts of its 3-toed footprints after confrontation. The creature has been seen disappearing into a nearby coal mine, and similar sightings have continued up until the 2010s. Today, there is even a commemorative event, and it's held around the anniversary of the sighting. Pretty cool. I like that it gets the community together. It seems scary. Kind of reminds me of Mothman. 8 out of 10. Let's keep going. This video is kind of evolving, so now it's more. Now I'm just ranking these guys. Okay. If I lose any more brain cells, this might just end up being a tier list. Kansas. Deer Woman. Deer Woman, or sometimes known as Deer Lady, is a spirit from Native American mythology. She can be seen in 2 forms, either a beautiful young woman with deer feet or just a deer. And her general vibe can kind of shift depending on the context of who she's dealing with, but for the most part, she has her sights set on men who have harmed women and children, and to them, she is vengeful and murderous, typically known for luring these men to their death. Overall, Deer Woman's got a pretty cool vibe. Good job, Kansas. Kentucky. The Pope Lick Monster. Yeah, you heard that right. We're already off to a weird start. The Pope Lick Monster. Unfortunately, this monster is not known for licking the Pope, but it doesn't get much better. Pope Lick Monster, or more commonly known as Goatman, is a legendary part man, part goat, and even part sheep creature, reported to live beneath the railroad that goes over Pope Lick Creek in Fisherville, Louisville, Kentucky. Legends about the Goatman claim that it uses hypnosis and voice mimicry to lead trespassers on its bridge, either onto the tracks in the way of a oncoming train, or to below the bridge where it can attack them with a blood-stained axe. Typically, Goatman would make its voice sound like the voice of either someone else or even potentially someone familiar to you, making you want to see who's talking to you and where they are. Some legends state that Goatman is so vengeful because he was treated so poorly during his lifetime for being such a different creature, at least different by human standards. And some legends state that Goatman is simply a reincarnation of a farmer who made a deal with the devil. Either way, he's definitely strange looking, and if you're passing by a bridge in Pope Lick, Kentucky, don't lick the Pope, don't go under the bridge, don't go over the bridge, and if you hear somebody you think you know, you don't. Get out of there. Louisiana. Fille Fouillée. To describe what you're looking at, let me give you a bit of context. The story of Fille Fouillée starts in Acadia. Legend states that there was a blacksmith named Will Smith. No, not Will Smith, Will Smith. And when Will Smith died and went up to heaven, he was given a second chance at life. But that second life he lived was not a good one. Unfortunately, he chose to do evil this time around. Because of this, the second time he died, the devil doomed him to live on Earth forever with only a single coal to warm him. That is why this cryptid or spirit is only really seen as a dimly lit orb in the distance. There is typically no figure associated with this creature. Fille Fouillée spends his time in the swamps of southern Louisiana trying to lure people out deep into the swamp to their death. It is advised that anybody near the swamp at night avoid following any strange dim lights in the distance, as the ending is never truly good. Maine. Kawakwa. Kawakwa is a cryptid from Abenaki folklore from northeastern United States, specifically Maine. The creature is described as a giant, cannibalistic, half-animal, half-human creature that roamed the forests of present-day New England in ancient times. The Kawakwa is described as being a former human whose heart turned to ice, either because of evil spirit possession or because they committed a crime that was truly dreadful, like cannibalism. The only sensation the Kawakwa is able to feel is an insatiable hunger, and their existence is pretty pitiful. They are no longer claimed to exist, so there is no risk to you or me, but if you have a time machine and go back to ancient times and decide to go to New England of all places, look out for the Kawakwa. It may want to eat you. And by may want to eat you, I mean he will lick and nibble you from head to toe. Maryland. Chessie. Can you guess what this creature is going to be? Did you guess another Loch Ness Monster type creature? Could you guess because the name is completely uninspired? Well, congratulations, you have a functioning brain. Chessie, not to be confused with Nessie, as in the Loch Ness Monster, as in the cool one, is a reptilian type creature that is reported to be either black or brown that has been seen as early as 1936 in the Chesapeake Bay in Maryland. Not going to go too deep on this one, pretty uninspired. Loch Ness Monster clone, Salmonella clone. Sorry, Maryland. Let's keep going. Massachusetts. Thunderbirds. The Thunderbird is a legendary creature, especially if you're a North American.
Just as raw metal is forged into something stronger, we too can be shaped as we conquer life's challenges.
Massachusetts. Thunderbirds. The Thunderbird is a legendary creature, especially if you're a North American indigenous person who's really into art and culture. The Thunderbird is considered to be a supernatural being with supernatural power and strength. A Thunderbird can be best described as a very large eagle with supernatural powers. Some of those powers being the ability to create thunder by simply flapping its wings, and also the ability to cause lightning by flashing its eyes. The Thunderbird has very deep ties to indigenous people's history and culture, and for that reason, the history and lore is deep, and I'm definitely doing it a disservice by going over it this quickly, but it's pretty cool. 10 out of 10. Good job, Massachusetts. Michigan. The Michigan Dogman. The Michigan Dogman is essentially the Michigan equivalent of a werewolf, but it's still kind of cool. The Michigan Dogman is a cryptid that was allegedly witnessed in 1887 in the lower peninsula of Michigan. It is described as being a 7-foot-tall, blue or amber-eyed bipedal canine with the torso of a man and a fearsome howl that sounds like a human screaming. According to the legend, the Michigan Dogman only appears in a 10-year cycle that falls on years ending in 7, for example, 2007, 2017, 2027. The majority of these sightings have taken place in the southern part of Michigan. And for as how ferocious and scary the Dogman may seem, many believers say that the Dogman can be scared away simply by clapping at it, which is kind of hilarious. Oh, and if you're able to scare away the Dogman without using your hands, give me a call. Only because I totally might need you to save me one day. Minnesota. The Wendigo. The Wendigo is by far one of the most well-known mythical creatures, folklore creatures, urban legends, cryptids, whatever you want to call it. If you're watching this video, you probably know about it. And honestly, for good reason. It's cool looking, the lore is deep, and it might even be real. I've already discussed it on the channel, but I'm going to describe it again because it's really cool and I know you guys want to hear it. For starters, the Wendigo isn't just from Minnesota, it's kind of from all over the place, all across North America. I felt it was best fitting here because Minnesota was kind of slim pickings, and it was a good middle ground between all of the possible locations Wendigos could be from. The Wendigo is often said to be a malevolent spirit, sometimes depicted as a creature with human-like characteristics which possesses humans. The victims of the Wendigo feel an insatiable hunger and have the desire to eat other humans and commit horrible murders often. In some representations, the Wendigo is described as a giant humanoid with a heart of ice and whose approach is signaled by its foul stench and sudden, unseasonable chill. If this sounds familiar, it's likely because we just spoke about the Kawakwa, which is a very similar creature with its hunger and heart of ice. And I'm not sure who came first, the chicken or the egg, but I know that the Wendigo is a lot more popular. Wendigos are definitely scary and super interesting cryptids, and I would recommend looking into them deeper or maybe watching this video about mythical creatures that mentions the Wendigo. But for the scope of this mega compilation, I'm gonna cut it here. Great job, Minnesota. Mississippi. The Pascagoula River Aliens. The Pascagoula River Aliens aren't just any aliens. They are the aliens associated with a pretty famous UFO sighting and alien abduction account from 1973. For context, on the evening of October 11, 1973, 42-year-old Charles Hickson and 19-year-old Calvin Parker told the Jackson County, Mississippi Sheriff's Office that while they were out fishing, they not only saw aliens but were abducted by them. They claimed that the aliens paralyzed them, left them unconscious, and examined them for hours before later releasing them. This isn't about the abduction, but actually about the aliens themselves. These aliens are described as having robotic, slit mouths and crab-like pincers. They had more or less of a humanoid body, commonly associated with gray-ish aliens, but these ones seem just a little bit different. You be the judge if specific aliens count as cryptids, but in my case they do. Honestly, Mississippi was kind of dry, so I thought this was interesting. Shout out Pascagoula, Missouri. The Ozark Howler. The Ozark Howler, unsurprisingly, is said to live in the dense forests of the Ozarks, which span across Missouri, Arkansas, and Kansas. But for this segment, we're focusing on the howlers that live specifically in Missouri. The howler is typically described as being bear-sized, with a thick body, stocky legs, and black, shaggy hair, accompanied with glowing red eyes and prominent horns. Its cry is often described as being the combination of a wolf's howl and an elk's bugle, also combined with the laugh of a hyena. Sounds like a pretty horrible trio. The howler is said to be a fierce hunter and a protector of the wilderness, also with supernatural abilities and a fierce protective nature. So if you're in the Ozarks, specifically in Missouri, and you don't want to encounter the Ozark Howler, respect the wilderness, don't go out at night, and if you do hear a terrifying sound, just go. Montana. The Flathead Lake Monster. Loch Ness Monster variant, but with antlers. The coolest thing about this cryptid is Native American legend surrounding it, which I'm gonna tell now. According to legend, long ago, the first native tribe to live in the area lived in an island in the middle of the lake. One winter, while they were crossing the frozen lake to move to another camp, two girls saw antlers approximately 2 feet in length protruding from the frozen ice. Thinking the antlers belonged to some animals, the girls decided to chop them off and take them. While trying to take off these antlers with sharp rocks, the antlers started to shake and the ice split open all around them. The monster's head opened, appearing through the ice, and shook its giant antlers. These girls used special abilities to transform into balls and escape the monster, but half of their tribe drowned in that lake. That's the story. So, moral of the story, don't steal antlers you find in the ice, because if you do, you might live if you have the ability to turn into a ball, but you're gonna kill all your friends, so don't do it. Nebraska, the Alkali Lake Monster. The Alkali Lake Monster is a huge alligator-like horned creature that lives in, you guessed it, the Alkali Lake in Nebraska. It's not a direct Loch Ness Monster ripoff, so that's why I'm giving it a bit more love. This monster is claimed to have rough grayish brown skin and also is 40 feet long, and like I mentioned before, it has a horn in between its eyes on its head. The legend states that this lake monster consumes livestock in large quantities, causes earthquakes, and even disorients travelers that get too close to it. According to my research, I couldn't confirm if it was believed.
If it's gorgeous, you want stunning, beautiful. Look for the grit. Because it's the pros who are out there, pulling together dozens of projects a year, thousands in a lifetime. They're not cookie cutter and never the same. Pros know what looks amazing, and they know where remarkable is always in stock. At Floor & Decor.
To be supernatural or not, but I'm gonna assume it was because not many creatures cause earthquakes unless they're super thick, which is a completely different story. Nevada, Tahoe Tessie, Nevada's Loch Ness Monster. Moving on. New Hampshire, Wood Devils. Wood devils are believed to be one or a small group of Bigfoot-like creatures in the woodland hills of Coos County, New Hampshire. They've been spotted since the 1930s and described as tall, around 7 to 9 feet, with shaggy tan gray hair and very similar to Bigfoot's, besides the fact that they are slightly skinnier. A strange trait about this cryptid specifically is that they refuse to hide behind trees. If they are already behind a tree, they will hide behind it. But if humans are coming near them and they are not near cover, they will simply stand still and stare at you until you leave. Kind of creepy, kind of cool. That's about it. New Jersey, the Jersey Devil. The Jersey Devil is a legendary cryptid that is said to inhabit the forests of the Pine Barrens in South Jersey. This cryptid is described as a two-legged, goat-like, bat-like creature with hooves. Let me explain. The creature is said to walk on 2 hooved feet, have a goat-like body and a horse-like head with 2 large, leathery, bat-like wings on its back. It's also said to have a forked or pointed tail as well. Oh, and its hands aren't hooves, its hands actually have claws. The legend states that it moves quickly and is often described as emitting a high-pitched, blood-curdling scream. This may sound obvious, but the New Jersey Devils, the official NHL team of New Jersey, is actually named after this cryptid, which is pretty cool. Now that I think about it, this might be the first time I've ever mentioned sports in this channel, which is kind of funny. New Mexico, Teratorns. Okay, this one's a bit interesting because this is actually a real creature kind of mixed with cryptid mythology. Teratorns are prehistoric birds that were the ancestors of modern-day vultures. Skeletons that have been found measure their wingspans to be over 20 feet long, and they were thought to have weighed over 100 pounds, which for a bird is insane. These birds are presumed to be extinct, but they have found numerous skeletons. Why I mention this on this list is because in New Mexico, the Thunderbird cryptid mythology that we mentioned earlier exists in New Mexico as well, and it is believed that the Thunderbirds were potentially based off of the Teratorns, which existed long before ancient peoples, but they still somehow had knowledge of them and maybe even encountered them. New York, Champ. Champ is the Loch Ness Monster of Lake Champlain in New York. That's about it. North Carolina. Wampus. Wampus, or the Wampus cat, is a cryptid based in Appalachian folklore. It is described as a fearsome hybrid between a mountain lion and a woman, but kind of just displays itself as a mountain lion with 6 legs. Believers claim that the Wampus cat roams the wilderness, emitting eerie sounds to strike terror into the hearts of those who encounter it. It's simple, but kind of cool. I'll give it that. North Dakota. Thunderbirds. I don't know how I accidentally made this the same cryptid for 2 different states, and this is the 3rd mention I've had of this cryptid in this video, so yeah, Thunderbirds, woo, let's keep going. Ohio. Loveland Frogman. The Loveland Frogman is simply described as a humanoid frog creature that stands at about 4 feet tall. Honestly, more of a chill dude than a cryptid, but figured you guys would like him. Say hi, Frogman. Oh yeah. If you've made it this far, say hi Frogman in the comments to say hi to Frogman and also to confuse people that haven't made it this far yet. Oklahoma. The Oklahoma octopus. The Oklahoma octopus is a cryptid that is said to live in man-made freshwater lakes in Oklahoma where it attacks and kills unsuspecting swimmers, and that's it. Oregon. Gumbaroo. The Gumbaroo is described by early lumberjacks as being larger than a bear with tougher, shiny black skin that absolutely nothing could pierce. It is even claimed that bullets just bounce off the thing. And according to the legend, the only way to kill it is with fire, and if you set it on fire, it literally explodes. This cryptid does have a good name, so congrats, Oregon. Nice job, Gumbaroo. Pennsylvania. The Squonk. Shout out to Pennsylvania for having one of the most depressing cryptids there is. The Squonk is more or less of a pig-like creature that only walks around at dusk and dawn. It is covered with extremely loose skin that is littered with warts and moles. The Squonk is famously known for being perpetually unhappy and always crying, like a lot. Skilled hunters can even track down the Squonk by finding its tear-stained trail. And when the Squonk is concerned, frightened, or feels like it may be in danger, it can literally dissolve into a puddle of tears to escape any danger. Doesn't get much sadder than that. Rhode Island. Vampire Mercy Brown. The cryptid for this one technically is just vampires, but this story is kind of interesting and unique to Rhode Island specifically. The Mercy Brown vampire incident occurred in 1892, during what is known now as the New England Vampire Panic. At the time, tuberculosis was running rampant, and for some reason, people thought that this disease outbreak was caused by the influence of the undead. During this time, the people would perform rituals to banish the undead from our plane of existence forever. Why this is called the Mercy Brown vampire incident is because during this time, the Brown family had their daughter, Mercy, die of tuberculosis. Friends and neighbors of the Brown family believed that one of the family members was a vampire, although they didn't call them that at the time. This was in accordance to folklore at the time, which linked multiple deaths in a family to undead activity, aka vampire activity. The story goes a lot deeper, but as you know, this video is long. Rhode Island, vampires, let's keep going. South Carolina. The Gray Man is a legendary cryptid from South Carolina that is considered a friendly ghost. He appears on beaches and shores, particularly before hurricanes and other strong storms. The legend states that he was on his way to propose to the love of his life when he was killed, and now his spirit wanders South Carolina, warning others of impending danger. The legend states that if you encounter the Gray Man before a storm, you will be protected and your entire house may be saved. This is a pretty interesting and potentially our first upbeat cryptid on the list, so good job, South Carolina. I like this one. South Dakota. Tekuhi. Tekuhi means big man in the Lakota language, who are the indigenous peoples of South Dakota. Tekuhi is said to be a supernatural being who serves as a guardian spirit protecting land from invaders and malevolent creatures that hunt humans and animals. He is a cryptid that protects the nature and humans and animals from other cryptids, and for that reason, he's okay in my book, which is why I discussed this Bigfoot dude. Tennessee. The Tennessee Wildman. The Tennessee Wildman is basically the opposite of Tekuhi. Like Tekuhi, he is a 7-foot tall, dark-haired, humanoid creature, although that's about where it ends. He has piercing red eyes and screams a disturbing war cry that frightens anything that hears him. He smells awful, kind of like Bigfoot, but he is extremely aggressive. The Tennessee Wildman is extremely strong, fast, and agile, and is extremely territorial as well. He has an obsession with targeting dogs and women, and although he is typically seen trying to attack women, he has never been successful, as these women always find a way to escape. What do you guys think? Evil Bigfoot, cool or not cool? Texas. Donkey Lady. Donkey Lady is the famous cryptid said to haunt the Donkey Lady Bridge in San Antonio, Texas. According to the legend, the bridge is inhabited by the spirit of a woman who is horribly disfigured by a fire, leading to her being referred to as the Donkey Lady. It is said that she haunts the bridge, appearing to unsuspecting travelers who pass by, and the legend also states that she may even chase or attack those who get too close to her bridge. I kind of feel bad for the lady. She got made fun of for something she couldn't control, but at least she's getting revenge. Good for her. Do you, Donkey Lady? Utah. Skinwalkers. No video about cryptids is truly complete until you mention skinwalkers, and this video is no different. In Navajo culture, a skinwalker is a type of harmful witch who has the ability to turn into, possess, or disguise themselves as an animal. Skinwalkers typically use these disguises or possessions to stalk their prey and kill and attack people. They also have other supernatural abilities such as super strength and voice mimicry to lead people to their certain death. The skinwalker lore is deep and goes far beyond the scope of this video, but I have made a video discussing them in the past. They're very cool, and check them out after this video if you want. Vermont. The Northfield Pigman. The Northfield Pigman is a cryptid or urban legend from Northfield, Vermont. Descriptions of the pigman vary, but he is typically described as a humanoid creature with the body of a large pig, but with the features of a man. Sightings of the pigman have been reported across rural areas surrounding Northfield and often in the vicinity of old farmhouses or abandoned buildings. Some interpretations believe that pigman is the result of an experimentation gone wrong or a spirit of a deceased farmer seeking revenge. Although the origins are still unknown and often debated. Pigman is definitely creepy and sometimes is even described as just a boy that went missing in the woods who decided to wear a pig's face as a mask. But yeah, lots of lore, kinda creepy. Good job, Vermont. Virginia. Snallygaster. Like almost every cryptid, descriptions of the Snallygaster vary, but it is often depicted as a fearsome dragon-like creature with large wings, sharp claws, and a metallic beak lined with razor-sharp teeth. According to the folklore, it preys on livestock and unsuspecting travelers, specifically children, by swooping down from the skies and snatching its victims. Some variants of the Snallygaster say it has tentacles instead of razor-sharp teeth, but either way, it's a terrifying-looking creature. Washington. The Conser Lake Monster. The Loch Ness Monster, but in Washington. West Virginia. Mothman. The legend of the cryptid known as Mothman originates from the 1960s in Point Pleasant in West Virginia. Mothman is described as a winged humanoid creature with glowing red eyes and is believed to be a sign of impending disasters. The Mothman legend has taken Point Pleasant by storm, and there is so much tourist attractions based around it, and I have covered Mothman in another video of mine, so I won't go too deep into details. But there are many stories where he is seen jumping at cars from the side of the road and jumping on the top of cars that are parked in rural locations at night. It is a creepy cryptid that showed up and almost as fast as it appeared, disappeared from the zeitgeist. It is now simply a figment of our imagination. Wisconsin. The Beast of Bray Road. The Beast of Bray Road is described as a 7-foot-tall humanoid-style creature covered in hair or fur with the head of a large wolf that also has glowing red or orange eyes. It's been seen running on 2 and 4 legs, and some reports describe it as being close to a werewolf, and others say it's more close to a Bigfoot-style cryptid. Not really a ton going on here, but what can you expect? It's Wisconsin. Just kidding, Wisconsin. Love ya. Wyoming. Jackalope. Admittedly, this is likely my favorite cryptid on the entire list, simply because I find it cute, and honestly, I hope it exists, or at least did at one point. The jackalope is a cryptid that is described as being a rabbit with antelope horns, and that's basically it. They're pretty iconic in the Wyoming area, urban legend scene, and even pop culture as well. I know this video is alphabetical, but we kind of saved the best for last, unintentionally. And with that, bros, I have to say thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you know that I do take your feedback. The scariest mythical creatures that probably existed. That is exactly what we're going to be talking about today, and this list is spooky. If you're new here, this is actually the 3rd video in my scariest mythical creatures series, but you don't need to have watched those videos to understand this video. Each of my mythical creatures videos is a new list, and just like the other lists, this list starts scary and gets even scarier as the video goes on, and all of these creatures are from different parts of the world. Let's begin. Starting off in the birthplace of freedom, we have Mothman from the US of A. Mothman is one of the most recently discovered creatures on this list, with his story only originating in 1966, relatively recently compared to some of the entries on this list. Mothman was first spotted in the small town of Point Pleasant, West Virginia, but his legend has grown immensely over the years. Early witnesses described Mothman as a large black creature with glowing red eyes, 7 to 10 feet tall and muscular. They claimed it appeared bird-like in nature, but was much too big to be a bird. Something interesting about the Mothman lore is that sightings really only took place from November 15th, 1966 to December 15th, 1967, meaning that there was only about 13 months of sightings. December 15th is actually a pretty significant date when it comes to Point Pleasant history. It was the date of a rather tragic event. The Silver Bridge, also known as the Point Pleasant Bridge, a bridge that connected West Virginia and Ohio, collapsed. Not only did it collapse, but it collapsed during rush hour traffic. This resulted in the death of 46 people and the permanent loss of 2 bodies. Now, why am I bringing up the Silver Bridge incident? Well, it's because in 1975, the book by John Keel, The Mothman Prophecies, claimed that not only was there paranormal events related to the sightings, but that there was also a connection to Mothman and the collapse of the bridge. To me, that's a pretty serious claim. During the 13 months of active Mothman sightings, there was hundreds, and later on it was revealed that there was over 100 people that were too scared to even admit that they saw the Mothman. With that being said, I'd put Mothman as number 1 on the list because I believe that he is definitely scary, but his intentions are too unknown to be truly. Although some things have been attributed to him, the only real claims that can be made against him is that he was standing there menacingly, and also the fact that he would potentially bang on the roofs of teenagers' cars. If you've seen any of our other videos, you know that these are extremely tame actions for a mythical creature, and I also believe that the Mothman could have very well existed simply because of all of the evidence there is and how passionate the Point Pleasant community is. This city has a big sculpture of the Mothman in its downtown. Like, this is the one thing that happened in Point Pleasant, and they are not living it down. My personal thoughts on the matter are that since he was only seen for a short amount of time, I think it's very possible that this could have been someone playing an elaborate prank or trying to be a superhero for a short amount of time until they got bored of it. But even if Mothman is some sort of supernatural being, I believe the scariest thing about him is his appearance. And for that reason, he is only number 1 on the list. And like I mentioned earlier, this video gets scarier as we go on. So let's move on. Second, we have Nixie. The Nixie stems from Scandinavian and German origins. These creatures almost always depict a human female, but they can vary from looking like an old woman with green teeth, skin, and hair to looking like a beautiful woman with green teeth, skin, and hair. They are also often covered in moss, seaweed, and seashells. Although Nixies are sometimes described as having a fish tail in the water, they can appear on land in full humanoid form, but one tell that always gives them away is that their clothes are always slightly damp and dripping water. Nixies are commonly described as nymphs or water sprites, or even mermaids, and all of which are technically correct, but I believe that most people would probably identify what I've already described as a mermaid. The one thing that makes the Nixie rather unique is the fact that the lore is much older and dates way further back, and also their unique abilities. Some traits that the Nixie shares with mermaids is their infatuation with humans, and their beauty in songs used to seduce sailors, typically into danger. But that isn't always the case. Some Nixies require an annual human sacrifice. Some Nixies have a lust for humans, which has a romantic and not deadly ending, which I won't get into any further detail, but you can imagine. Nixies also have the unique ability to control the weather if irritated. With all of this being said, I think the Nixies are very interesting and infatuating, but I definitely think they are scarier than Mothman for the simple reason that they have more malice intent. Typically, not always, but typically. Whereas with Mothman, we have no reported deaths or requirements of sacrifice. He's not a sexy green lady, but he's also not necessarily trying to drown you. So I feel like for that reason, the Nixie is a little bit scarier. But not quite as scary as our next entry, from Down Under. I'm of course talking about the Bunyip. Not the Bunyan, that's something else. The Bunyip. Originating from Aboriginal mythology of southeastern Australia, the Bunyip is described as an amphibious creature lurking in watermeadows, swamps, creeks, and other watery places. Although physical descriptions of the Bunyip vary drastically, the most common descriptions typically include a round head, an elongated neck, and the body resembling an ox or a hippopotamus, or even a manatee. The Bunyip has also been reported to make roaring or booming noises. The Bunyip inhabits and protects